In the 1950s and 60s, Ethiopia was heavily dependent on foreign aid, particularly from the United States, to support its development while maintaining independence from any single foreign power. Emperor Haile Selassie played a diplomatic balancing act by securing support from both sides of the Cold War. In 1959, he visited Moscow and was warmly received by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, who pledged over $100 million in aid. He then traveled to China to secure additional support. These alliances were carefully managed to leverage more aid from the US, which feared growing Soviet influence in Africa. Selassie portrayed Ethiopia as a key African nation while quietly sustaining ties with communist powers. Selassie's influence wasn't just political. In 1966, he visited Jamaica, where the Rastafarian movement revered him as a divine figure, King of Kings, as prophesied in the Book of Revelation. But while Selassie was celebrated abroad, his frequent absences began to erode his authority at home. One of the biggest internal issues was the situation in Eritrea. In 1962, Selassie dissolved the Eritrean-Ethiopian Federation and annexed Eritrea as Ethiopia's 14th province. This sparked outrage, especially among Eritreans who saw it as a betrayal of their autonomy. Armed resistance emerged, led by groups like the Eritrean Liberation Front, ELF, which sought an independent Arab Islamic state. Eventually, civil war broke out as different rebel factions also began fighting each other. The Ethiopian Prime Minister, Aklilu Habte-Wold, urged Selassie to place Eritrea under military rule. However, Ras Asrate Kassa, the region's governor, opposed this, believing diplomacy would contain the insurgents. Selassie initially supported Asrate's approach of benign neglect, but when violence escalated and General Teshome Ergatu, the military commander, was killed in 1970, Selassie reversed course. He declared a state of emergency, appointed General Debebe Haile Mariam as military governor, and launched a full military offensive in Eritrea, thus igniting a bloody conflict that would last until Eritrea's independence in 1993. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's strategic relationship with the United States began to falter. In the early 1970s, advancements in satellite surveillance diminished the value of the US communications hub in Asmara. By 1973, the US began reducing its aid and planned to shut down the Kagnew station by the end of 1974. Selassie made multiple trips to Washington to request more military support, but his appeals to President Nixon were unsuccessful. As the US shifted focus toward Kenya, Ethiopia found itself increasingly isolated. Desperate, Selassie returned to Moscow, hoping to persuade the Soviets to stop arming Somalia. But the Soviets delayed his meeting and offered no concrete help. Internally, the emperor faced a crumbling regime. Succession was uncertain. Crown Prince Asfor Wasson had suffered a stroke, and although Selassie later named his grandson, Prince Zera Jacob, as acting heir, the move was seen as too little, too late. The situation worsened with a catastrophic famine in the northern provinces of Tigray and Wollo in 1972-73. Despite international aid arriving, the Ethiopian government was slow to respond. Public outrage grew when it was revealed that during the famine, Ethiopia had exported over 200,000 tons of grain. This decision, viewed as callous and detached from the people's suffering, shattered public confidence. By early 1974, Ethiopia's frustrations boiled over. A small mutiny in the town of Negele Barana, triggered by soldiers being denied access to water, sparked a chain of military and civilian uprisings. Student protests, teacher strikes, and military revolts spread across the country. The imperial administration tried to contain the crisis by increasing soldier pay and adjusting fuel prices, but reforms came too late. Prime Minister Aklilu and his cabinet resigned, and Selassie appointed General Aman Mikhail Andam's ally, Ndalkachu Makonnen, as the new prime minister. However, the military rejected this and demanded the arrest of former officials. When Selassie resisted, the army stormed the palace and carried out the arrests anyway. Selassie's silence during this power grab raised suspicion about his control over the state. In the background, a secretive group of military officers, calling themselves the Derg, emerged. In July 1974, they arrested Ras Asrate Kasa and began rounding up imperial loyalists. By August, the Derg had become the dominant force, staging parades, seizing government buildings, and diminishing the emperor's stature. Selassie was no longer referred to as King of Kings, but simply Negus. His palace was renamed the National Palace, and the Orthodox Church rescinded its support. Finally, on September 12, 1974, members of the Derg entered the palace and informed Selassie that he was being deposed. He was escorted out quietly and taken to the headquarters of the 4th Army Division, where many of his former ministers were imprisoned. The Derg suspended the constitution and declared Ethiopia a republic in all but name. While Crown Prince Asfar Wasson was proclaimed king-designate, the role was entirely symbolic. The monarchy was effectively abolished. Lieutenant General Aman Mikhail Andam, a respected officer and Eritrean by birth, was appointed chairman of the Derg. He advocated for reconciliation and opposed violent purges, but this stance brought him into direct conflict with Colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam, a rising radical figure. Mengistu pushed for executions of detained officials and a more aggressive campaign in Eritrea. Aman refused. In November 1974, Mengistu placed him under house arrest. Aman barricaded himself and resisted arrest, leading to a deadly firefight in which he was killed. In the days that followed, the Derg executed 60 political prisoners, including former prime ministers, military generals, and royal family members, without trial. The killings marked the beginning of the Red Terror. Selassie, still imprisoned in the palace, survived for 9 more months. On August 27, 1975, he died under suspicious circumstances. The official cause was listed as complications from surgery, but his personal doctor and loyal butler both disputed this, suggesting he was suffocated. His body was secretly buried beneath the palace bathroom. In 1975, the Derg formally abolished the monarchy and erased all references to the Solomonic dynasty. Selassie's face was removed from currency, buildings, and public institutions. For decades, his final resting place remained unknown. In 1991, after the fall of Mengistu's regime, his remains were discovered. In 2000, Emperor Haile Selassie was finally given a proper Christian burial, 25 years after his death.